Howdy y'all, it's Anna with Always Right, and in today's video, I'm gonna talk about the 3 tips and tricks that I use to help unstick the middle of my book, aka help me unstick Act 2 of my book. Keep in mind, there are plenty of other ways you can unstick your middle, you can get through your middle. However, these are the 3 tips and tricks that I used in order to get through the middle chunk of my book. The first tip is to identify your main locations in your book. Now, if you're doing a great adventure story where they're going on an exploration looking for the MacGuffin, you know, XYZ kind of book, this one might not help you as much. However, if you're writing a fiction or a romance, this could probably help you. Now, I'll use an example from my book. In my book, I had 3 main locations. The first main location was my main character's apartment. Second location was her workplace. Third location was the trailer park. What I did once I realized that I had these 3 main locations is I kind of assigned or recognized a pattern of conflict at these locations. After all, if you don't have conflict going on in every chapter, or at least most of your chapters, your book is gonna feel very slow, very dragging, and it won't be very interesting. Once you identify your 3 main locations, you can then create a list of potential conflicts as well as a list of potential characters. For example, in my book, I had 3 main locations. I had my main character's apartment, where it would feature my main character, her brother, or her love interest. Those are the only 3 characters that ever appear in her apartment. I established person-to-person conflict as my main conflict in the apartment chapters. My second main location was my main character's workplace. At her workplace, it would always feature the main character and then one of her friends. I always use these chapters to build my main character back up. At my main character's workplace, she wouldn't have a lot of conflict with other characters, but she would have a lot of internal conflict where she would be conflicted about her emotions, conflicted about her motives, about her actions. And if I ever wanted to kind of spice up those chapters or add a little bit more conflict, I would invite in one of my more conflict-centered characters. And my third main location is a trailer park. Now, my trailer park featured the widest array of characters for my book. I have my main character, her brother, her love interest, as well as about 3 or 4 other conflict-driven characters or conflict-creating characters. Most of my book takes place at this trailer park because that's where most of the conflict takes place. The trailer park is actually where my plot begins. It's where my inciting incident takes place. It's where my midpoint is for my book. And it is also where my climax is for my book. For the trailer park, I had a crazy amount of conflict as well as different kinds of conflict. I had society versus person, I had person-on-person conflict, and I had a little bit of internal conflict as well thrown in there. Once you've identified your main locations, it can be up to, I think, 5. If you're going above 5, you're really pushing it. But once you've identified your main locations, you can then structure your chapters a little easier and go on from there. One kind of trick of this tip is to look at the last 5 chapters. Is there a main location that you haven't included in those last 5 chapters? If there is, boom, you have the location, the characters, and potential conflict for your next chapter. Now, my second tip for unsticking your second act or the middle of your book is to have regular events. One example I can think of is Avatar: The Last Airbender. If they needed kind of a filler chapter, they would have an event. They would have a special occasion. They would have a festival take place in the book. By creating reoccurring events such as weekly parties like I have in my book, you're able to very easily structure the expectation for your reader as well as make it a lot easier on yourself. So I knew what my characters were doing every Friday evening. They were getting drunk and having fun. Boom. Did I include every single party that they went to? God, no. I included the party scenes about 3 or 4 times. Having these regular weekly events helped me schedule out when the characters would interact with each other, as well as give a reason for them to be all together. It's better to take this tip into consideration closer to the beginning of your middle, or you can apply this in one of your edits. But events, parties, festivals, they're a great reason to throw a lot of characters together and let them just kind of rub shoulders and get angry. And my third tip to help unstick your middle is to plot backwards. For example, when I started out my book, I knew exactly what was going to happen at the beginning. I knew exactly what was going to happen at the end. So what I did is I looked at the end and said, okay, what would be the dominoes that would lead up to this? I wouldn't look at the beginning and go, okay, where do I need to put these dominoes? What are these dominoes to get to the end? It's easier if you go from the end backwards because you know what the end result is. Then you can logic your way backwards. This method's pretty common when you're writing thrillers. However, it's also very useful for any genre. For example, one of my characters had to move, and I knew he needed to be moved out by about the 70,000 word mark in my book. So I created a reason that he would have to move out and move to a totally different location. So then, out of that one requirement, I was able to come up with 3 chapters. I had the chapter where it was the inciting incident for him having to move, the chapter where he actually moved, and then this chapter where he was in a location. Keep in mind, my chapters are tiny, so you can use this kind of thriller writing hack in your writing if you don't know what you need to do or you can't figure out where you want your middle to go. This writing hack of kind of plotting backwards works especially well with like the second half of your middle, but if you know what you kind of want to happen in the middle of your book, then it can also work for the first half of your middle. So these are my 3 tips and tricks to unstick your middle, aka to get through Act 2, to get through that muddled, messy middle. By doing these 3 tips and tricks, I was able to build on the plot and kind of connect the dots, if you will. Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far, please hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe. I post writing vlogs every Tuesday and then more kind of like author-to-be, traditional writing hacks kind of videos on Fridays. Also, let me know down in the comments what y'all use to kind of get through your middle, or if these helped you any. But thank y'all so much for watching, and as always, let's get writing.